The laboratory was filled with state-of-the-art equipment, but the atmosphere was heavy, laden with anticipation. Dr. Ethan Prescott, was about to share a discovery that could change everything. I looked at my team. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant astrophysicist with eyes that seemed to capture every star. Dr. David Carter, the geologist, who always had a skeptical look, as if he was assessing the risks with every step. And Dr. Emily Foster, the marine biology expert, who seemed to vibrate with the possibility of new forms of life. "Thank you for being here," I began, feeling a knot in my stomach. "What we found in the underwater cave is, well, it's hard to describe." I took a deep breath and projected the image of the cave onto the screen. It emits a radiation I've never seen before. The implications of this are huge. Unknown radiation? Isn't that dangerous? Sarah questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I replied, "but it could also lead us to something extraordinary. Imagine parallel dimensions, new realities, what we could learn." David shook his head, concerned. "What if this radiation affects us in ways we can't predict? We're talking about the ocean floor." "I understand your concerns, David," Emily said, her voice soft but full of excitement. "But this is a unique opportunity. We have to explore." "However," I intervened, "we must be cautious. Scientific curiosity is vital, but the team's safety is the priority." As we discussed, the tension in the room intensified. Emily's words echoed in our minds. The unknown could offer us answers, but it could also consume us. Finally, we decided that curiosity would prevail. With the plan set, we began preparing for the expedition. The tension was palpable, but there was also a contagious excitement. Deep down, we all knew that what we were about to do could lead us to a new world or put us in absolute danger. As we entered the submarine, the darkness of the ocean surrounded us. The glow of the cave ahead seemed to pulse as if it were calling us. "Are we ready?" I asked, looking at the determined faces of my team. "This is just the beginning." The cave pulsed around us, a mix of bluish light that seemed to have a life of its own. As we crossed the portal, I felt a chill down my spine that wasn't just the temperature of the environment. Reality around us shifted abruptly, and when our vision finally stabilized, I realized we were in a towering but dark city. The buildings were tall, made of a silvery metal that reflected the light of a gray, almost oppressive sky. "This isn't what we expected," said Dr. Sarah Mitchell, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't believe we're in an alternate version of Earth." "We need to be careful," warned Dr. David Carter, looking around with suspicion. "This place has an air of control, like everything is under surveillance." "Look!" Dr. Emily Foster shouted, pointing to a large screen displaying the image of an imposing man. His voice echoed through the city, proclaiming slogans that exalted order and submission. It was impossible to ignore the feeling that we were being watched, every movement monitored. "This is insane. What happened to freedom?" I asked, breathless. Fear spread in my chest as we walked through the streets. "This civilization is governed by a totalitarian regime," Sarah replied, her gaze dark. "It's as if science and truth were sacrificed at the altar of control." As we continued to explore, a strange sense of déjà vu took over me. I saw a familiar figure crossing the street. My heart raced when I realized it was a distorted version of myself. He was wearing different clothes, but the expression was the same, a vacant and submissive look. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a warning tone. "This place isn't safe. We're trying to understand, how did we get here?" I asked, perplexity evident in my voice. "Understand? There's no understanding here, only acceptance," he replied before disappearing into the crowd. Dr. Emily, visibly shaken, looked at us and said, "What if all these versions of ourselves are what we really are? What did we abandon in the name of science?" Her words reverberated in my mind as we tried to process the distorted reality surrounding us. The air was heavy with the realization of what we could become, and a deathly silence fell over us. "We need to get out of here," David insisted, his gaze firm. "I think we've seen enough." With a nod of agreement, we headed back to the portal, but each step felt heavier than the last. The idea that our curiosity could lead us to this darkness was a shadow that followed us. And at the same time, a sense of urgency pushed us away, toward the safety of what we knew. The atmosphere around us weighed like a dense fog. As we ventured into yet another dimension, I felt a growing sense of unease. Dr. David Carter was silent, analyzing the devastated landscape before us. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake a feeling of despair as I saw what was left of what had once been a vibrant world. This is what happens when humanity doesn't learn from its own mistakes," David murmured, his eyes wide as he took in the ruins. "Look at this. Nature, completely decimated." "I think we knew it wouldn't be pretty," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But seeing it up close is different. It's real." The scene before us was desolate. Crumbling buildings, charred trees, and an arid land that seemed to cry out for help. A sharp wind blew, carrying the scent of smoke and destruction. I wondered how many wars had been fought here, how many lives had been lost in an endless cycle of violence. We decided to explore further, moving toward a group of figures approaching in the distance. As we got closer, I realized they were survivors, men and women with tired eyes and gaunt bodies. One of them, a middle-aged man with visible scars, stared at us with suspicion. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse and full of distrust. "Where did you come from?" "We're exploring," Dr. Ethan Prescott said, trying to be diplomatic. "We came from another dimension. We want to understand what happened here." "Understand?" The woman beside the man laughed, but there was no humor in her laugh. "You think you can understand? We tried escaping to other dimensions, but the doors closed. We're trapped here." Those words resonated within me like a warning echo. The team exchanged worried looks. The weight of responsibility began to settle in our hearts. Our actions could have deeper consequences than we imagined. "This is our fault," I muttered, unable to contain the truth that plagued me. "We're here because of our insatiable curiosity." Ethan shook his head, frustrated. "We need to go back. We need to reflect on what we've seen." But as the atmosphere grew heavier, he hesitated. "But what if we can find a dimension where humanity saved itself? What if this is a sign for us?" "We can't ignore what's right in front of us," David intervened, his voice firm. "Exploration can't come at the expense of others' lives. We need to go back before it's too late." Silence settled among us, and I could feel the tension growing. The words of the man who confronted us echoed in my mind. Were we really ready to face the reality of our choices? The pulsating cave behind us seemed to grow more distant. We crossed back through the portal, and as we emerged, I was enveloped by a soft, warm light. It was as if the sun were smiling at us. The landscape before me was almost surreal in its beauty. Lush trees, vibrant flowers, and a cloudless blue sky. The atmosphere seemed infused with a contagious happiness. I looked at Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who stood beside me, and saw the same mixture of awe and caution reflected on her face. "Ethan, this is impressive, isn't it?" Sarah said, her gaze fixed on the breathtaking view. "Impressive, yes," I replied, but a pang of distrust ran through me. "But I wonder, where are the shadows? Where are the problems humanity faces?" Dr. David Carter approached, observing the inhabitants of the utopia around us. They smiled, interacted with each other, but there was something off. It was as if they were all somehow programmed. "This happiness seems a bit forced," I murmured, feeling the unease growing within me. "It can't be real." "We should delve deeper," Emily suggested, a glint of curiosity in her eyes. "Who knows what we might learn here?" I agreed, but a knot formed in my stomach. As we moved forward, the feeling of distrust intensified. We came upon a large central building where people gathered. A woman approached us, her smile radiant, but her eyes held a depth I couldn't decipher. "Welcome. You're about to discover the true meaning of happiness," she said in a melodious voice. "Here, everyone is free to live without worries." "And how do you achieve that?" I asked, hesitating. "No problems, no conflicts?" She laughed softly but didn't answer. Dr. Sarah, observing the interaction, couldn't contain her indignation. "This isn't freedom," she asserted, her voice firm. "It's an illusion. A world without challenges isn't a real world." The woman gave us a confused look, as if she couldn't understand what we were saying. The light and happy atmosphere around us seemed to crumble. I knew we needed to uncover the truth behind that perfect facade. "Let's investigate further," I suggested, determined. "We need to understand how this society really works." As we moved away, I noticed that the conversations around us started to quiet down. People were watching us with a mix of curiosity and something deeper, as if they were assessing our presence. "Ethan, I don't like this," David said in a low voice. "Something is very wrong here." "I feel it too," I replied, looking at the faces that had seemed so happy before. "And I need to find out what's really going on before it's too late." With that, we pressed on, determined to unveil the dark secrets hidden beneath the radiant surface of that utopia. What we found there could change everything. As we tried to stabilize the portal, a sense of desperation and urgency took hold of us. The pulsating glow of the opening showed signs of instability, and the pressure mounted as alternate versions of ourselves emerged from the shadows. I looked at Dr. Emily Foster, my heart racing as I saw the shock on her face when she confronted a version of herself living in a world where science was revered as a beacon of hope. "You can make a difference here," the alternate Emily shouted, her eyes shining with fervor. "We need you. Science is our only salvation." Emily hesitated, her voice trembling as she responded. "But what about the consequences? What about the dimensions we leave behind?" Dr. Ethan Prescott, sensing the growing division among us, tried to intervene. He turned to all of us, frustration dripping from his voice. "We need to stay united. We can't be swayed by these versions of ourselves. What we're seeing is just a reflection of our fears and desires. What do we really want? What if we stay?" Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the team's astrophysicist, questioned, her mind already wrestling with the possibilities. "What if we find a way to make things better?" The tension in the room was building, like a storm ready to erupt. The team was divided, each of us struggling with our own ethical dilemmas. Dr. David Carter, ever the pragmatist, shook his head. "We can't forget what we've seen. These dimensions aren't just possibilities, they're warnings. We need to go back." As the debate intensified, an unknown force began to manifest. The portal seemed to want to swallow us, and the dark versions of ourselves drew closer, their faces twisted in expressions of despair and anger. "You can't leave," a version of me shouted, his furious gaze reflecting the pain and frustration I felt. "Staying here is the only way to redeem our mistakes." A chill ran down my spine, a sense that we were surrounded by our own failures and unmade decisions. Panic began to spread among us. Emily, tears in her eyes, looked at me and then at her alternate self, as if being pulled in opposite directions. "I don't know what to do," she exclaimed, her voice echoing in the underwater cave. "We have to decide now." I shouted, adrenaline making my heart race. The portal pulsed, and the feeling of time slipping away was palpable. With one last look at the versions of ourselves, we did what we thought was our only way out. We activated the portal, but an oppressive force pushed us back, as if the universe was trying to teach us a painful lesson. Whatever we were experiencing was more than just an exploration. It was a mirror of our own souls. And there, surrounded by our shadows, I realized the real battle was just beginning. The portal pulsed before us, an unstable window into the unknown. The pressure was mounting, and I could feel the tension among my colleagues. "We need to decide now," Dr. David Carter shouted, his face reflecting the same confusion I felt. I looked at Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who was frozen, lost in her own thoughts. "If we stay, we could help our alternate versions," she said, her voice trembling. "But what if we can't get back? What if we're stuck here forever?" I countered, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "What if this is our only chance to make a difference?" Sarah insisted, her gaze fixed on the portal. Her words echoed in my mind, a part of me wanting to believe there was a solution. "We need to stay together. We can't split up now," I pleaded, but the divide was already forming. Dr. David, always the pragmatist, shook his head. "I can't waste any more time. We need to go back. Now." Then, something shifted. Dr. Sarah, with a determination I had never seen before, took a step forward. "I'm staying. I can help the Sarah here. I can do something for her that I couldn't do for myself," she said, her voice firm, but her eyes filled with doubt. "Sarah, no. You don't know what might happen," I shouted, trying to pull her back, but she stepped away. "Ethan, you know I have to do this. It's the only way to redeem my failures." Despair took hold of me as I tried to grasp the magnitude of her decision. The portal began to glow intensely, and I knew time was running out. "Sarah, don't do this," I begged, but she was already resolute, her gaze fixed on her alternate self on the other side. And in the moment the portal stabilized, an almost supernatural force pulled her in. I reached out, but it was too late. And then, everything happened in a flash. The portal closed abruptly, a final blinding light that separated us. Dr. David and I fell to our knees, stunned. The silence was deafening, and the reality around us began to change. I looked toward the horizon, where the once blue sky was now turning into a blend of dark tones, as if the world was reflecting the horrors we had witnessed. "They're gone, Ethan. We can never go back," David said, his voice low, full of despair. I knew he was right. That cave, those portals, everything had a cost. And now, what was left of us was a distant echo of a dark future, a reminder that our fears and failures were not just ours, but those of all humanity. As the world changed around us, all we could do was face the abyss we had uncovered.